Hi everyone, welcome back to class. Today I want to illustrate for our next assignment, which is Deuteronomy 31 to 10, what a sample syntactical and clause analysis would look like. So I invite you to open up to Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 1, and we'll look at this first verse. Again, for the instructions, you're to do a translation of all of verses 1 through 10. You're going to do the syntax and the clause analysis for verses 2, 3, and 4. All right, well, let's walk through the text. V'haya, this is our opening statement, and again, haya is fairly straightforward. That's a third masculine singular perfect from haya, but what's important here is to notice that it has a vav on it. So this is an example of a perfect with a vav consecutive. So in the Arnold Choi book, you would want to look it up under 3.5.2 and look at the perfect plus vav consecutive. And this is an example. And what the perfect plus the vav consecutive does is it essentially, instead of saying this and it was, this is and it will be. It sequences back with chapter 29. So this would be a sequential use, and the force of the verb now, it almost has an imperfect sort of meaning. So and it will be. And in terms of a clause, this is the whole clause, and it will be, and then it's going to get filled in. So this, in a sense, is our one of our main overarching clauses by itself, and the rest of the verse is essentially subordinate in some ways to this grammatically. But what this functions to do is it pushes the whole thing into the future. Okay, then we have ki. Ki often means for because. It's also as a temporal force, and so in this case it's probably when. So and it will be when. Then we get a verb, yabou. This is third masculine plural call imperfect from bo. This is a middle weak verb, bait, vav, aleph, but as we've come to see that you typically do lose the vav or the yod in perfect or imperfect form. So this is a regular form of this verb. So this third masculine plural, upon you. And now here's the subject of the verb, this little phrase right here, kol ha devarim ha ele. So this is all the words, and then we have a demonstrative adjective, these, all these words. So this right here would be the subject. All of these words. So when all of these words come upon you. So we have a temporal clause, right? So because key is going to mean when here, that's temporal. So you can look up all the clauses we're going to look at, and they're back in Arnold Choi Section 5. This would be an example of a temporal clause that could be described further if you go all the way back to there, to the 3.5 point. Let's see. In the subordinate clauses, the temporal clause is covered in 5.2.4. And this is probably the category of later or succeeding. So it's looking down into the future here again. Now, in both of these verbs, I should have said something about that. The perfect, this is a stative verb, and we already said what the vav consecutive is. Now this is an imperfect. The imperfect force here would be future, and it's a call, and in this case, this is a fiative call. Let's see. Okay, so and this would be the example of again a temporal clause that goes from here to here. So you'd want to like maybe put that in if you're going to write out the Hebrew text. If you think about how to turn it in, put it in some kind of color. So use different colors for different kinds of clauses. Let's see. We would also looking ahead. Let's go to the next section here. Ha beraka v hakilala. This is the blessing and the curse. So, and it will be when all these words come upon you, what words? The blessing and the curse, right? So this just kind of fills in those phrases. Which So now we have a relative clause, right? So notice this, asher nataiti lifeneka. That's going to be a relative clause right here, which I gave before you, or I put before you, I set before you. This is from Natan. This is going to be call perfect, first common singular. The perfect again is fiative. The call is fiative, and the perfect here is just going to be completed action. It's from the past. I get put before you, and you will, v'hai shevota el levaveka, to your heart. Now this is an interesting verb. You can see on here, this is going to be another perfect with a vav consecutive at the front of it. This is a hiphil, so you're going to want to study this carefully. Second masculine singular perfect from the verb shuv. And so this would be something like, you cause to return to your heart. So what's it talking about here? This is so it's like when all these words come upon you, the blessing and the curse, and essentially it's implied, and you cause them to return to your heart or in your mind, or they come to mind. You might ultimately translate that. In all the nations. So when you've been gone into exile. So when you're sitting in exile and suddenly it dawns on you what's actually happened, and you remember Yahweh's words. That's what this is saying. And so now here what we have, this is going to be the actual independent clause or coordinate clause in this phrase here. And it will be, then we have when, all this stuff happens, and you cause to return them, those words, to your heart among all the nations. So this would be what we'd call an independent clause, or as Arnold Choi called this, a coordinating clause. Among all the nations, which, now again, another relative clause, and we see Yahweh your God there. And so this is going to be the particle there. That's probably going to put a to on there. To which Yahweh your God. And then this last verb, again, this is another kind of a difficult parsing. It comes from a third hey. I'm sorry, not a third hey, a third. It's a first noon, third guttural verb. It's from nadach, and it's a hiphil. So you can see the hiphil with the we have the hey on the front, we have the hirik yod, noon assimilation, and then we have a second masculine singular suffix, to which Yahweh your God, again, exiled you, banished you, and this is going to be the hiphil here is causative, and again the perfect is going to be fiative. So let's go back over that again quickly. So we start off with, we have a coordinating clause, because this is an opening, and it will be. Then we get the temporal clause, when all these words come upon you. What words? The blessing and the curse. Relative clause, which I set before you. Now we get the second coordinating clause. And you cause, apply them, to return to your heart among all the nations, which Yahweh your God, to which Yahweh your God banished you. So those would be the clauses. We have two relative clauses, we have a temporal clause, we have a coordinating clause, and a coordinating clause. Okay, a couple things that I also want to look at while I just have a minute. Let's look at these prepositions. Make sure you're also labeling the prepositions. I've gone ahead and I think I labeled all the verbs for you, but let's look at the prepositions. So for that, you're going to look at 4.1. And here we have, the first one is aleka. So this is when all these words come upon you, or when these words come upon you. And this is kind of, this would be the spatial vertical relationship for that one. That's 4.116a. And then we have Lifnay before. So we can look up Lifnay. That's going to be 4.1. That's going to be you can argue that's locative because they're being put right in front of you. You want to be more metaphorical. You could also call that perceptual if you wanted to. That would be option C there. Then we have causing them to return L heart. So this is to your heart or to your mind. So look at L. That's going to be 4.1.2. And let's see, it's kind of metaphorical, so it's at least terminative there. Let's see, I'm missing a page, 56. So you can also call that perceptual since we're talking about perceptions. And then bait, it's among all the nations. So when you're exiled, so that's most likely going to be a spatial locative force of bait. And that's your prepositions. One other thing, let's look at one. We did have a construct phrase. Kol is bound to head devarim. So let's look at that one. We do have one genitive. So let me just make a quick remark about that. What's the force of all of these words mean? This would be an example of 2.211 measure. All it's giving you the genitive, the words marks the things measured by the word all. So all of what? All of these words. Again, that's a quick walk through the text. I hope this helps you to complete the rest of your work. And if you have any questions, let me know. Again, I'm Brian Russell, and it's my absolute privilege to be your professor.